Great day in the morning. This is Jonathan Albin, and this is Game Master's Soapbox. Glad to have you with us. Hope you stick around and take a gander at what we're talking about today. We are going to be discussing, in particular, let me do my little switcheroo here. We are going to be talking about, in particular, 7 underappreciated RPG game genres. If you were watching the other day, I did an episode on 7 overused and overworked genres, and so only fair for me to swing to the other side of the fence, so to speak, and talk about the ones that are underappreciated that I believe you'll find really kind of fascinating to play in. Now, I'm not sure how many game systems there are out there that cover all of these, but I can tell you that the NycosRPG mechanism is built specifically to engage all of these and then more different genres, each with its own specific set of benefits and skills and such. And we'll talk about those perhaps at a later time. But right now we're going to talk about these 7 unappreciated genres. And while I won't put brand names on them in particular, there are certain shows and movies and such that fit into these fairly well, and so there'd be great ways to find inspiration for each of them. So we're going to start off right at the beginning, shall we? The first we're going to talk about is Sublight Space Opera, and by Sublight Space Opera, of course, I'm referring to a situation where the ships are not traveling at the extreme speeds of a jump gate or a hyperdrive or anything like that, but simply are operating within the parameters of the environment that they are in. In particular, there's a show that at least starts off in this space, and that was a certain program about the asteroid belts. And like I said, I'm not going to go into the individual brands, but the idea here is that the stories can be dynamic. They have to do with things even as simple as time dilation and time accessibility over an episode. For example, how long it takes for a message to go from point A to point B can be problematic within a Sublight space opera game. And so the level of stress and dynamics adjusts accordingly to that. One of the major reasons why the Sublight Space Opera is such a good place to go, especially early on, is that it catches you exactly where you are. Our technology is not to the point where we have faster than light travel, so the space game, so to speak, will still feel very close to home, and yet you'll also have that fresh feel of technology slightly beyond our own. The second category of genre that I want to talk about are the buddy cop or ensemble shows. In the 80s and 90s, these were really popular motion picture themes, and quite frankly, many of the game sessions that I ran were stolen, ripped off, pulled full whole cloth from the screens and converted to a fictional fantasy setting. And the game response was absolutely dynamic, and most people didn't realize the source material because it was so different from what it was. So pulling against the buddy cop or the ensemble cast shows gives you an opportunity to really play up the connectivity between the players and the opposition nature of the rest of the world, so it becomes sort of an us versus them game environment. Then the next, of course, will be the Silver Age Supernatural. And while there are quite a few games that embrace the Silver Age in terms of superheroes, the idea of the World War II to post World War II time frame of America, there's an underrepresented number of games that are tied into the murder mysteries and the mystical kind of conflicts that occurred in that period. There were certainly a lot of people who were buying into the mysticism, but there wasn't a lot of attention drawn to it in motion pictures. There are a couple of veiled examples, and you could even argue that some of the Call of Cthulhu era materials were targeted specifically to this time frame, but in reality, most of those were a little bit earlier. And so, having an adventure that's set in the shadow of the I guess they call it the Great War, World War II. I guess not the Great War. Anyway, World War II. That is a great opportunity to perhaps bring some of the European type mysteries and occult stories into modern times. Now, there are people who would argue that stories that have an occult theme or an occult angle are out there and off of the beaten track, but do remember that during World War II, the Germans in particular were fascinated with occult mysticism and the artifacts thereof, and so it's not too far from that storyline to move into it. And as a matter of fact, arguably the Indiana Jones sort of fits into this category because the effects and such that are mystical are much more on the supernatural side than they are, for example, moralistic or religious. Another category that I find really is going to be considered a trend in the next year or so would be modern mysteries. The idea of the forensics files shows. Persons that are fascinated with this genre now are becoming savvy enough that they can carry on reasonable conversations about the things that occur in forensics because the terms have become so commonplace as to be useful in terms of describing situations. And so the modern mysteries angle will definitely be something that could be pursued, not only from the standpoint of a Scooby-Doo type story, but also the idea of genuine criminal elements and even like Men in Black kind of operations where the mystery is deep, but the lore that wraps around it is more timely and more recent in the field. Of course, one of my favorite alternatives would be to run a adventure that is in one genre through the lens of another. And so the idea of running a roaring 20s gangster story through the lens of the Cthulhu universe, or conversely, a Cthulhu story drawn through the roaring 20s. These are both kind of dynamic ways to mix and match in order to create a unique feel to the game and perhaps some new mysteries and new mechanics that others haven't pursued. Then, of course, beyond the Sublight Space Opera that we started with, we also have the idea of a jump gate jockey, that the participants can travel through extended distances in space, but they have to do so through fixed locations and jump gates, and this creates a more exciting dynamic of pursuit as people are racing to make it to the jump gates either before or in advance of the departure of an enemy or whatever. It also lends itself to the idea of the gates either being shut down or controlled by enemies, and therefore adds the opportunity to add even more genres into the mix as you go along. Of course, the final one that I want to cover before I run out of time tonight is the concept of the urban mythologies. Now, there are a couple of movies, Scream is one of them that I think of, that covers somewhat the urban tropes of the world and how they can impact you as a storyteller and as a player. And the idea of taking modern mythos and merging it with the ancestral or historic mythos definitely adds a different flavor. This would be something along the lines of what Shadowrun was originally and how it kind of played off of the mythologies of certain cultures that were underrepresented in the overall theme of mythology and really took root in that genre for play purposes. So this, again, would be a great place to bring your adventurers where you'd have the agency for new material, and you'd also have more levity or control of what portions of those mythologies you want to play off of. The main thing to remember when you're creating an adventure and you're adding a new genre to your play system is that you consider your own consumption. What is it that you take in? If you are a big fan of the long form murder mystery series, then you're definitely going to be looking at your characters having a week over week experience of murder mystery and drama and such. Whereas if you are more affiliated with a team sport kind of an event, you might do better with a ensemble cast kind of an event. So take that into account, but also realize that player communication is key. If your players have conveyed to you what they would like to play and you're not finding a way to accommodate it, you're probably leaving not only money on the table per se in terms of hours of game mastering that you could do, but you're also leaving behind some really powerful tools, because a player advocate in a game system is definitely more powerful in getting new players than a player who is only lukewarm towards it. And then finally, when I'm talking about these different genres, some of these are not built for the long-term campaign, so you might want to consider running shorter cycle campaigns, 2 or 3 or 4 weeks to finish telling a story, or perhaps even a 1 or 2 shot adventure to really hype up the mechanical benefits of that specific genre. So with that, I've reached my accomplished time in record time, so it was only 15 minutes and I got through it. I want to thank you for taking a watch of this. If you like what you see, go ahead and like and subscribe. And if you don't like what you see, I thank you for the time that you did give us, and I hope to see you again in the next video. This is Jonathan Albin, and this is Game Master's Soapbox, the unappreciated RPG genres show. Have a great night.